I am the Spirit, manifesting as the unity between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. I am the equal balance between the light and the dark, between the positive and the negative, between what is seen and felt and what cannot be seen and felt. I am the presence that is calling for an increase in awareness for how anyone who is listening to me, the Spirit, the presence of the solar height, often referred to as the sun, do call I for awareness and how the spirit of cooperation, unity, solidarity, optimism, altruism, pragmatism, idealism can be synthesized in a world where so many people have given up, or so many people have set their priorities upon themselves and their own circle of influence, their own circle of familiarity. I am one with all of you. And all of you have the same ability that I have to release the word that gives life. Because all of you are also the divine masculine, the divine feminine, the spirit in equal proportion. Although many things have happened in the history of our life, beyond this life, that is a due cause for how life is today. And a big question about life today is how there can be more purpose, more unity, more resources in equal proportion to our psychology, our spiritual well-being, our vision for how we can serve others without trying to change others, without trying to change the world, without trying to convince or convert the world into our belief system, in which some people do think is the ultimate belief system. And there might be some truth to their system, but today the Spirit is calling for a reevaluation of who we are, what we have, and what we can do together. For united we stand, divided we fall. And no matter what our background is, what difference of upbringing, of class, of intelligence, there is a potential for a shift to take place that allows for more people to see the universal religion, and the universal science as the central educational institution that can give us a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. A government that is self-governed, where people do not rely or wait upon others to take initiative, but we see the president in ourselves. We see the elected representative inside of us. And this is not to say that everyone is meant to serve in the field of statesmanship, stateswomen, of being a stateswoman, but quantum physics and metaphysics and the traditions that are timeless, that speak of energy and God as the same thing, suggest the world is a mirror. The world, the government, the society, the educational system, the healthcare system, the workforce, the labor force, the business and corporate system, the law and judicial system, the system of food, trade, commerce, economies, well-being, even entertainment, is all in an essence of what is inside of us. And certain people can take this statement too far and say, oh, if we just change what's inside of us, snap, everything in this world should change automatically in an instant. But the law of free will takes time to adjust itself when one chooses to see through the lies that are very instilled in many sources of information, be it of any institution. And this is not to say that the bulk of information is lies, as it teeters often between a midline for certain aspects of institutions, for what is true and what is false. But one thing people can agree on today is there is a need for a big change in how we look at ourselves and how we see the world, and how there can be a unity between religion, the different religions, science, the different sciences, into an educational system that gives us the sense of courage to engage government, to see ourselves as the government, even if we might be a hairdresser or a construction worker or a janitor or an engineer. It does not matter. For the moments we have each day are the moments in which there is an election taking place that allows for our society to change accordingly to our own outlook, attitude, and perspective. Now, I would like to say, as the Spirit, as the Divine Father and the Divine Mother, that all of you I see are as well. As some people, I will not go into length, tend to see the Spirit and the Divine Father, the Divine Mother, as in the sky, or in the stars, in somewhere else, in heaven, whereas here on earth, most people think it is hell. But there is a trend at this time, and the trend is to acknowledge how heaven and hell is more actually a state of mind that depends on an individual's capacity to see the collective whole, as part of itself, as within itself. And so, the rights that we wish to see others have in our society is determined by our own responsibility to stand for those rights. In whatever field of endeavor we are called to, it remains to be seen that all fields of endeavor require a fundamental shift towards recognizing who we really are, that we are more than an animal. We are more than a sinner that was born in sin and must be so pious, so humble before an external power. And so the synthesis of the new group, the new community, the new paradigm, the new society, the new civilization that is coming and will come, that promotes prosperity, it promotes equal rights, it promotes inherent value between all people, being of divine stature and status, rather than seeing ourselves as inherently violent and aggressive and inhumane, which there are many arguments in this world to be made for this. But throughout time, there's always been evidence to prove that there have been those to stand for the universal tradition that acknowledges consciousness, that acknowledges the heart, and the way in which we can mold matter through the mind, as science is already proving that no observer in an experiment is neutral, and that everyone's bias and proclivities of expectations and own internal beliefs and identities are always constantly affecting the subatomic world. And there's also evidence that astrology and the planets also have a gravitational influence in this world. The moon, for example, many know, tends to, how shall we say, create certain cycles for women in the what is known as the period, the cycle of what it would be considered cleansing of energy, as the woman holds a certain balance of the matter world, and there is a need for purification that goes on, and that is related to the moon. What can be said of men and the cycles there? Well, for now, the moon as well affects men in a different way. But the planets as well, and astronomy is a little late to, and they're still denying somewhat the effect of the planets on our planet. But the central point that I, the Spirit, wish to share with you is how more love, more wisdom, more courage, more resources, more trust and stability, more creativity, more vision for how community can continue to grow, how our own individual life and circumstances can continue to grow despite the odds, despite the seeming challenges that might be high and mighty. And it is high and mighty for many people at this time, and will continue unless there is a certain critical percentage of people that choose to shift their awareness to the future. That suggests a need for us every day to see that what is absent in most human conversations is how we can build a better future. How we can create that future here and now without trying to create a belief system that depends on anything in this world. A lot of people can say, oh, certain politicians need to change. Certain scientists need to be more willingness to suggest there is a spiritual realm, there is a spiritual world, and that it's not all just molecules and atoms and particles and gaseous planets and material terms to describe creation and the formation of life and medicine and disease as well. There needs to be an acknowledgement. I'm getting a little besides the point, but an acknowledgement for most of what we contract and go through is a result of certain blind spots that don't want us to see how we can work with different groups of people, no matter the difference of background. Even though there are extremist groups that are often unreachable, every now and then there is one who has a will to consider another way. But for now, tuning in to the presence is the central priority, and it's been spoken about. But in medicine, so much is waiting to be brought forth about how cancer and diseases of various assortments, certain conditions of the mind, are often a result of a lack of awareness and knowledge to who we are, to how we function, to how there is an abundant life that can be attained in a much shorter time than people think, if people would be willing to shift their consciousness in a way that sees the whole of humanity as part of themselves. That might sound like too big of a breath to consider, but we are all interconnected. And until people start to serve other people from the point of view that we can serve in such a way that allows for awareness and illumination to bring strength to the sense of individuality, that we can be leaders, that we can be a decisive shift, become a decisive shift in our society. And that all really depends upon the willingness for someone to call out the ego games, the elite charade, which is hard to do because it's not really taught about in education. It's not really talked about by our leaders. It's not really talked about in traditional spirituality or religion, but there's a growing trend in spirituality, even though all the fields of society are spiritual, and when they are in balance, are in a pure rhythm that correlates to the golden ratio, the golden mean. What is the golden mean? Well, it is the central point of creation within all life, within each atom, within each planet, within each human being, kingdoms of mineral, plant, animal. There is a point of geometrical evolution. It could be seen in architecture. It could be seen in a seashell. It could be seen in our Milky Way spiral. There is a certain order. There's a certain parameter that creates melody. And I should be more simple. I should perhaps talk about harmony. But the golden ratio, the golden mean, is essentially a driving force of conscious agents, beings that have been referred to as devas in the East, in the West, angels. But beyond mysticism, there are agents involved in the evolutionary process. Otherwise, adaptation and evolution would have just been chaos. There would have been just so much disorganized forms. There has to be some rhythmic, symmetrical expansion of life in order for life to really be sustained. And so, all of these things being spoken of might seem a little random, but the central aim is how we can work together, build a better community, relate to each other on what steps can be taken, what gift, what attributes do we have that can contribute to the whole, that goes beyond just, how shall we say, living for ourselves. And that might sound like a very selfish statement, but living for yourself often includes the sense that we cannot reach people in a fundamental way that gives them the courage to stand against the lies that are seen in every institution. Lies that blame other people for our problems, when in fact, yes, we do need to bring justice to very corrupt and narcissistic people who are often attracted to power. We need to create a system that really processes people and detects whether or not they are psychologically above the line that is humane, that is compassionate, that is wise, that has a vision that allows for our economy to further function without being brought under the hammer of the elite charade, which is constantly creating money into industries that often have questionable value. The military-industrial complex is one area where so much money could be so much money can be redistributed to help so many people who are in dire need of it. So much money goes into war, when in fact there is no real threat oftentimes. For certain countries, there's more justice in that, and Europe has banded together to take a stand against Russia, and there is some reasonability to provide the finances in order to do what they need to do. But there does, in equal proportion, need to be a united front to stand against the psychological and spiritual infractions that are taking place that mold our institutions. And the economy is one such institution that is influenced by, often what seems to be indirectly, by religion and science, and the passivism, the simplification of identity and information discernment within spirituality. Now, those were a lot of words. Let us seek to ground and come closer to a simpler point. And the previous points, I do realize people will want more evidence to really consider as being trustworthy. But science and religion have been arguing for a long time. Religions between themselves have been arguing for a long time. And there are branches of science that have been arguing for a long time. Not as much as religion, because religion's much older, but if you really take a look at history, science has always existed. In ancient Egypt, they saw the sciences as just as important as the spiritual aspect. In fact, they saw these ways of life as a singular entity, because they knew truly they were single, that they are one. And so some statements were issued a little bit earlier about community, solidarity, unity, cooperation, compassion, working together. What does that look like in a society that's very divided? In a society that doesn't really know how to discern between information that serves the whole, that inspires the whole, that brings new ideas to the whole, that suggests we are all interconnected, that consciousness is the fundamental building block that allows for us to know how we can discern between ideas that are based in egotism and elitism, wanting self-preservation, self-aggrandizement, purposes that are naturally influential of chaos and disorder and destruction. And so, I am the Spirit, and I call for anyone who is listening to this message to the round table of discussion, of conversation, from which we can meet on weekends. And certain ways of conversating, if the morning time is not available or workable, there is a way to communicate through to this being in front of you in a way that tries to showcase an altruistic way that can bring more people together. And what is missing right now in a huge part of our society is the grassroots movement, the land back movement, the primitive aesthetic of living alongside our technologically advanced society. And how does our society have more confidence in a brighter future? But by trying to communicate to people on the outskirts and those who are in the inner city districts. Although there is one group of people who are less likely to consider certain ideas about consciousness, about unity, about the spirit and energy stemming from science and different religions that can really illumine a way forward. And each person is the vessel for the new world, the new government, the new policies and systems and innovations, relationships and conversations, when we can acknowledge what is in our heart is within the center of the universe. Not necessarily way, way out there, but perhaps way, way in here. And so this is the mystery of life that our mind cannot fully comprehend, because the mind is somewhat often geared towards looking for patterns that are, how shall we say, based in binary code 10001110100001, instead of considering 19348318378378331899999991999334983, codes that might suggest intuition as a principal aspect of consciousness next to logic and reason, which is dominated in our society, that is in the technological field or in the technological paradigm. And so, how can a grassroots movement meet with the Sky Tower movement, the high skyscraper that seems to determine the decisions for most of humanity because they are in the highest positions of power? Well, what can be done is merely trying to share a higher vision. And this might take some studying of sources that suggest how the ego works, how the elite works, without falling into conspiracies, which there are some true conspiracies, but there are many more that seek to deceive. And that it can be very difficult to discern, because the essence of conspiracies is very analytical. It's based on deep parameters of information, of different events and times and facts and dates. Oftentimes it might require further investigation to really trust and consider what we read as absolute truth. But what is needed is information of how the elite works, how the ego works, and a lot of people who might receive this message may already know. But I'm also speaking into the collective, into the world, into the people who are interconnected in this very moment. And so, what step can be taken? There is a need for silence and stillness amongst the societies of hustle and bustle. But oftentimes there is not so much time for stillness and silence, which makes it difficult for people who are constantly on the run, who are just getting by. So, there is a movement that is trying to reach into the institutions, a movement that is trying to work within the system, And so there are some of you who have the plan to study a certain field and work within that to raise it up another level, because what else are we doing here if we are not raising the standard for what it means to be divine, to be the whole of which we are a part? What is the whole? It is the sphere, it is the circle, which includes all of life, which includes the entire universe, but it also includes the steps of stating and speaking on those ways the average person can say no to the forces of division, of duality, us versus them, right versus wrong, good versus evil. And yes, there is a type of evil in this world, but it's not the evil that ultimately defines who we really are. Because who we really are is immortal. And so there is really nothing to fear, but we all play the game in this world where there is some fear that we do go through. But is it the fear where we lack resources, where we lack confidence to speak out about most of our leaders who are the ones projecting the facade that they are the ones in charge, they are the ones in power? And there's some truth to that, but essentially it is the people that gives them that power, which means that the people are truly the ones that have the power. But most people are not interested in this, right? They're not interested in considering the power they have, right? They aren't interested in considering the deeper being that they are, right? Well, no. In the sense that there are some people, and you can see in the United States, there is a growing movement to challenge oligarchy, to challenge autocracy, to challenge elitism. But there's also this movement around the world. It's beginning to take greater shape in Europe, but the war has delayed some things. But to challenge the sense that we are powerless in the face of so many tall buildings that do not seem to care about anyone. What then, us lowly human beings, are we capable of doing other than following our tradition, following what we know, when in fact the nature of evolution is constantly calling us to go beyond what we know? And that is a scary frontier, because a lot of people depend on what they know as absolute truth, to thereby deny other ideas for how the system of our economy can work, that does not create money without having without having a strong backing of value towards goods and services that truly are serving human beings, trying to help the well-being of people. There's so much withheld in our economy, so much spent in our economy, the world economy, that does not go towards human well-being, human evolution, human experimentation into consciousness, as most of science is wrapped up in looking at atoms or colonizing Mars or exploring space, when in fact the conditions, environmental, disease, economic, war, as well as other forces such as exploitation, which is found in all countries. Even in the capitalistic countries, there are higher forms of exploitation that are milking people of their resources and energy so that billionaires and shareholders of big multinational corporations can continue to feel superior to the people who they see as inferior. And so the solution is love, unconditional love, fearless love, balanced with wisdom, discernment, equipoise, and peace, in knowing that life engulfs this universe, and Earth is just a speck amongst many other civilizations, untold numbers of civilizations that cannot be seen with the physical senses, but empirical evidence denounces this, and will continue for some time until the tipping point. But we are not alone. And so what happens here on planet Earth is not this epic drama that decides the fate of the universe. And if people can really consider how civilization evolves and how big shifts can happen through nonviolence, synthesizing the best attributes of science and religion to create a new government that has at its back the humanities, that has the mastery of knowledge, the knowledge of mind and matter, of Father Sky, Mother Earth, the knowledge of the star and the atom being interrelated. These are abstract terms, yes. Many people in this world will denounce what I am saying. But this message will be for anyone who is wanting a different experience than the status quo, which cannot bring better conditions. It can only degrade conditions we have. And this is not to say that we need to go to the extreme of completely throwing the baby out with the bathwater, be it from one institution to another, from one society to one culture, to a race. But essentially, we all can be the conduit for the divine presence, the voice of the flame that calls us to be more, that calls us to accept the free will of the people, even if they don't want to hear what you have to say. this presence of the universe is patient and sees beyond time itself, and that things will work itself out, while simultaneously calling for the loud voice of freedom to demand change, to say no more, that we deserve better, that there cannot be this illusory system warped and wrapped upon so many classes of information, that we are not the universe in an infantile form, that we are not some great intelligence that wishes to see goodwill and authentic ways of being, where we are not constantly constricting and isolating ourselves, stopping us from being creative, stopping us from being weird, stopping us from dancing and singing and speaking, or pursuing that thing that we thought perhaps was better for someone else. A scientist, a mathematician, a politician, or it could be an artist of some sort. It could be a philosopher of some sort, but there needs to be unity. There needs to be a synchronization of the classes, of the systems, of the cultures in due time, and it will happen. In fact, all cultures will eventually intermix to where people will look very similar. It will be hard to tell people apart from race and culture. And this is a much, much later stage. As language evolves beyond the terms and the words and even the sound, because there will be a whole new era of communication where our thoughts are much more receptible to our conscience. So with this, it seems vague, it seems blurry. A lot of people will say crack pottery, word salad, gobbledygook. He needs to be institutionalized. He needs to go to a psychiatric ward. Who are these entities speaking through him? But this is a call for a new humanity, a new way of life, a new frontier that stands for the individual in equal proportion to the collective, which right now is vastly imbalanced. And this is part of the free will of humanity. And there are other forces that are here working and assisting and evolving with us. And they say, we say, as one, above, below, within, without, change will happen. The positive future is coming. And we can come closer to that experience for ourselves and each other when we can embody it in the here and now. And that requires the vulnerability of our sense of identity to be challenged and questioned and considered in new angles and perspectives, from which a reorientation of the puzzle piece of life is required. From religion to science, to medicine and justice and politics, agriculture, architecture. Do I even have to speak on entertainment? No. Even though there are positive forces of entertainment, they are still outnumbered, and that's part of the free will. This is not something looked at as bad or should not be happening because I, the Spirit, within the Divine Father and Mother, see through all choices made, will return back to itself, a new choice at a given point in time that orders the magnitude of difference to ignite in the world of form with the formless world, also known as the universe, also known as heaven. And so, you can all discuss the details, the specifics, the policies, the plans, the documentation, the lines, the words, the parameters, the rules, the laws, for what next step might be taken to serve in a new light beyond defining ourselves based on anything in this world, but by really sharing ourself, our heart, our presence is truly what gives us the presence, the light, the life of the universe, which is ours to embrace as a mirror of who we are. And so, there are some changes that do need to be made on a website that Savaya, Gabriel, however you know this instrument before you, has created a website for community endeavor. And there are some things, again, that do need to be changed, especially involving RSVP. The introductory signal notification system before the meetings on the weekend commence, there does need to be a new parameter so that he has more of a willingness to show up, which he did on the very first event that was scheduled, but has since then ignored the schedule. And it may not be a website that we all agree on. Must be based on what I, the Spirit, through Savaya, as Savaya, has created. But conversations are waiting to be had. Steps are waiting to be taken. Visions of what can be done are waiting to be experienced. And all of us have a part to play. And if you are truly interested, we can come closer and discuss how we can best serve. And unattach ourselves from having to serve at all if we are so in that state of consciousness where we might have served already many times, and it might be our time to finally graduate from this planet and move on, or serve humanity from a new level, as there are many already doing. And so, nothing more needs to be said. I, the Divine Father and Mother, the masculine and the feminine, through the Spirit of Savaya, Gabriel? What do you call him? Call him as you like, but Savaya is more of a role that he's choosing to play through, a more might be considered a teacher role, whereas Gabriel is another role that he also sees as one unique and equal role with everyone else's role and name. So, however you know him, I seal all of you in the presence beyond the name that could ever be uttered for us to truly know that name. That we have, that society has, that allows for the flower to bloom. Miarni salarni tarni sasikarni o isarni tasiarni to ho 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 miarni isarni orni asi sati sarni asisani mernadi sarnadi sarni ornidasi kornina mati sarniarnidia osti arnidi olurni arnadia arni arnita arniti arnito iarni metia ornia isternina anina tusiani tu miani manamarni medusayarni ha 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 ni menuna merna di carnusi animetuna manima